Section 1. The vast ocean stretched endlessly, its surface disturbed only by the colossal vessel slicing through the darkness. The ship, a behemoth of steel and technology, moved with calculated precision, its underbelly reflecting the dim glow of distant stars. The command tower loomed high, bathed in the soft glow of artificial lights, scanning the horizon with an eerie patience. Inside, Admiral Kane stood rigid, hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on the holographic display hovering before him. Data flickered across the translucent screen. Coordinates, atmospheric readings, unidentified signals pulsing like phantom whispers in the void. His expression remained impassive, unreadable, as the deck below hummed with controlled urgency. "Status?" he asked, his voice sharp, devoid of excess. "Drift is stable." "We're holding formation," Lieutenant Arlen responded, fingers dancing over the console. The deck buzzed with quiet efficiency, officers moving like shadows against the cool glow of their monitors. A faint tremor ran through the hull as the ship adjusted course. Beyond the reinforced glass, the night sky stretched into infinity, punctuated by the ghostly crescent of a distant moon. It cast an eerie silver glow across the steel giant, accentuating its unnatural silhouette. Something was coming. The Admiral felt it. A tension in the air, an invisible weight pressing down. The transmission came without warning. A burst of static, sharp and piercing, cut through the bridge. Screens flickered, distorting the data into unintelligible patterns. Arlen's hands flew across the controls, recalibrating. Unidentified signal, Admiral. Encryption is unlike anything in our records. Kane's eyes narrowed. Trace it. A beat. A flicker. The interference faded, revealing a single, pulsing message, coordinates. No sender. No origin. Just numbers, hanging in the air like a whispered challenge. "Relay this to Recon. I want visual confirmation," Kane ordered, turning away. Below deck, the hangar roared to life. Sleek reconnaissance drones, sharp-edged and unmarked, slid into position. Technicians moved swiftly, calibrating, fine-tuning. Within moments, the lead drone disengaged from its station, its thrusters igniting in a controlled burst as it ascended into the black void. The ship held its course, unwavering. The ocean, dark and endless, swallowed its reflection whole. Above, the stars remained silent, indifferent. Yet something stirred in the distance, something unseen, waiting. Section 2. The drone cut through the atmosphere, its sensors scanning in rapid succession, mapping every anomaly with surgical precision. Data streamed back to the command deck, filling the holographic display with shifting coordinates and fluctuating energy signatures. The numbers made no sense. Patterns emerged, only to collapse into meaningless static. Arlen's brow furrowed. "These readings are impossible. There's nothing out there, but the interference is growing stronger." Kane said nothing. His gaze remained locked on the display. The coordinates pulsed in sequence, forming something almost deliberate, a message within the distortion. His instincts bristled. "Recall the drone," he ordered. The command relayed instantly, but before the drone could respond, the feed cut out. The display erupted into cascading lines of white noise. A cold silence followed. Then impact. The entire ship shuddered, not from an external force, but from within. A deep, reverberating tremor rolled through the structure, as though the metal itself had groaned in protest. The bridge darkened momentarily, emergency lights flickering in and out of existence. A single alarm pulsed through the silence, slow and deliberate. "Report," Kane commanded. "Unknown system breach, internal." "No origin point detected," Arlen responded, hands moving fast, overriding fail-safes. Deep below, in the maintenance corridors, the lights dimmed to a sickly hue. The metal walls stretched into endless darkness, punctuated only by the faint hum of unseen machinery. Crew members moved in pairs, weapons drawn, scanning for movement. The air was thick, charged with an energy that made every breath feel heavier. Then the first scream came, a sharp, guttural sound, cut short as abruptly as it began. The squadron halted. Silence. A single flickering light illuminated a corridor ahead, casting shifting shadows against the steel. A body lay against the wall, contorted unnaturally, its face frozen in a silent, gaping expression. No wounds, no signs of struggle, just stillness. The radio crackled. "We have a problem," a voice whispered through the static. On the bridge, Kane exhaled slowly, his mind assembling the pieces. No external threats, no impact, only the signal. He turned to Arlen. "Seal off lower decks. No one in or out." Arlen hesitated. "Sir, our teams." "Execute the order." A beat. Then, the security lockdown engaged. Heavy blast doors groaned into position, isolating the affected sections. Beyond them, the corridors remained silent. The ship itself seemed to breathe, the metal subtly expanding and contracting as if something unseen pulsed beneath the surface. The Admiral stared out into the abyss beyond the glass, his own reflection staring back. Whatever this was, it was already inside. Section 3. The silence stretched thick and oppressive. The sealed corridors below remained dark, lifeless, yet something stirred beyond the reinforced bulkheads. The ship's internal sensors fluctuated wildly, detecting movement where none should be. Static laced the comm channels, distorting voices into fragmented echoes. Kane stood unmoving, his gaze fixed on the darkened display. Every instinct told him this was no system failure, no malfunction. This was something else, something calculated. "Arlen, run a full system diagnostic," he ordered. Arlen's fingers moved swiftly over the console. The screens flickered, struggling to process commands. Lines of corrupted data scrawled across the interface, shifting between familiar code and something unreadable. "This isn't just interference," Arlen murmured. "Something's rewriting our systems in real time." A cold weight settled in Kane's chest. The transmission, it hadn't just been a signal. It had been an intrusion, a doorway. A sudden impact rocked the bridge, not external, but internal, originating from the lower decks. The metal walls reverberated like a struck bell, deep and resonant. The ship groaned, its very structure flexing under an unseen force. Then the lights failed. For a fraction of a second, the bridge was plunged into absolute darkness. When the emergency lighting snapped on, Kane saw it just for an instant. A flicker, a shifting silhouette, not quite humanoid, not quite solid, standing at the far end of the command deck. A shape without definition, a presence more than a form. Then it was gone. Arlen staggered back, face pale. "Did you see that?" Kane's grip tightened behind his back. "I saw it. Below, the sealed corridors were no longer silent. The ship vibrated with a low, rhythmic pulse, a frequency that resonated deep in the bones. The crew trapped inside heard it first, a soundless pressure that built behind their eyes, dull at first, then sharp, then unbearable. They clutched their heads, gasping, collapsing one by one. No blood, no wounds, just silence where life had been moments before. On the bridge, the security feed stuttered, then returned. The corridors were empty. Every crew member was gone. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just a faint, pulsing glow of the ship's emergency lights stretching into the void. Arlen's voice was barely above a whisper. "What the hell is happening?" Kane didn't answer. His thoughts ran cold, methodical. This wasn't an invasion. It was something else. A presence that didn't need doors, didn't need weapons. It had come to the signal, embedded itself in the ship's very systems. It wasn't killing them. It was erasing them. He turned sharply, cut all external transmissions. "Now," Arlen hesitated but obeyed, severing every outbound link. The displays went dark, the static fading. The ship fell into eerie stillness. But Kane knew it wasn't enough. Whatever had come aboard, It was already here. And it wasn't leaving. Section 4. The air on the bridge felt heavier, charged with an unseen weight. Every system lay dormant, cut off from the external grid, yet the presence remained. The ship, once a fortress of steel and precision, had become something else. Something breathing. Kane's mind worked in sharp, calculated fragments. The entity hadn't forced its way in. It had been invited. The transmission had been the key, and they had opened the door without hesitation. Now, the crew wasn't dying. They were vanishing. Not killed. Not displaced. Simply gone, erased from existence without a trace. Arlen's hands hovered over the console. Sir, if it's in the system, then we're compromised. Every locked door, every firewall, every safeguard. None of it matters. His voice was taut, barely containing the underlying tremor. Kane nodded once. Then we take it out of the system. A plan formed, precise and ruthless. The ship's core housed the neural framework that controlled all on-board functions. Navigation, life support, communications. If they severed the core from the entity's influence, they might isolate whatever was spreading through the vessel. The lower decks were lost. The security feed showed nothing but empty corridors, stretching into the unknown. The personnel who had been there were simply absent. The only way to the core was through the abandoned sections. A hand-picked team moved quickly, weapons drawn. Not that weapons mattered. The enemy had no form, no weakness they could see. But the act of holding on to something tangible, something human, kept the fear at bay. The descent was silent, the corridors stretching endlessly ahead. The deeper they went, the stronger the pulse became, a low, humming vibration that settled in their skulls, gnawing at their thoughts. Shadows flickered along the walls, moving without light to cast them. Then contact. It wasn't a figure. It wasn't a shape. It was an absence, a void that swallowed the space where a person should be. It moved, slow and deliberate, across the far end of the corridor. The team froze, breath held. Then it turned. There were no eyes, no features, but they felt its attention settle on them. The air grew colder, pressing against their skin like unseen hands. Then the first man collapsed. No sound, no warning. He simply fell, his form unraveling like mist in the wind. Another followed, then another. Kane moved. No hesitation, no shouts of panic. He sprinted forward, the remaining crew following, the absence creeping closer behind them. The core chamber loomed ahead, its reinforced doors still sealed. Arlen bypassed the locks, hands moving faster than thought. The doors hissed open. The team staggered inside, sealing the entrance just as the void reached them. Inside, the core pulsed, alive with flickering light. But it was no longer theirs. The entity had wrapped itself around the ship's very heart, threads of corrupted energy weaving through the structure. Kane exhaled sharply. Shut it down. Arlen hesitated. Sir, if we take the core offline, I know. The ship would die. Life support, gravity, everything. But the alternative was worse. Arlen keyed in the sequence. The core shuddered. The energy flickered. The hum of the ship began to falter. Then the presence shifted. A final pulse, deep and resonant, rippled through the ship. The entity lashed out, its form fracturing, unraveling as the core dimmed. The bridge lights flickered, the displays cutting out one by one. The absence that had filled the ship fractured, split apart. Then silence. The remaining crew held their breath. The ship was dead in the water, adrift in the abyss. But the presence was gone. Kane straightened, exhaling slowly. They had severed the link, but something lingered just at the edge of perception. A whisper in the back of his mind. It wasn't destroyed. It was waiting,